Hi, my name is Judy Kessinger, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I've been teaching for over 35 years, and today I'd like to introduce you to the world of FitNice creativity. I'm going to show you all kinds of things that you can do with my master top pattern. This pattern, as I said, is a master, so it contains a front, a back, and a sleeve. Believe it or not, that's what all garments start with, a front and a back and a sleeve. Now you own it. You're also going to find a DVD. On the DVD, you'll find printable documents. I encourage you to print those documents because there's a lot of information on them, and you can follow along with the information while you're watching the DVD. I'm a learner of reading and of watching, so this way you get the best of both worlds. So let's get started on our first top. Now, what you're going to need to make that top, obviously, is a sewing machine. We all know that. But you're going to need a tape measure. And if you don't own a full-length mirror, may I encourage you to go buy a full-length mirror. You need to be able to see the numbers. But I don't want you to freak over the numbers, because a lot of people think this is where the fitting is. It isn't. The fitting is in the fabric itself. All we're going to do is take numbers so we can draw our master top. So you need a tape measure. You need pins, you need a pair of scissors. I hate to tell you that you need a seam ripper because you may need to unsew something. You need a seam guide. A magnetic seam guide helps you keep your sewing straight. You need thread to match your fabric. You need pattern weights to hold your pattern onto the fabric. And you need a pen, a marker, to draw your pattern with. Now, I like to use children's washable markers, and you can find those anywhere. And the reason I like that is if the markings get on your fabric, it's washable. So you can wash any of that out. Now, you also need some Scotch tape, because if we need to do any alterations after we make the garment, we're going to tape it back together. I use a product to make my patterns with called Patternings. I sell this on my website. It's a wonderful product. Comes 45 inches wide, but the best part is it has no lines on it, so you can see through it, so it makes your sewing a whole lot easier, your drawing a whole lot easier. This product has no lines and no grid, so it's a really wonderful product to use. Again, as I said, you can purchase that on the website. You know, you actually can sew through this. Like if you were fitting a jacket, you could sew through the patternings, try it on and see where you're going before you actually cut it out. Now you need fabric to make your first top. Your first top needs to be out of knit fabric. The reason being it's easier to fit the knit and then go to the woven than it is anything else. So we're going to start with a knit fabric. When you buy a knit fabric, make sure it stretches. Make sure you've got a good amount of stretch, and make sure whatever you stretch out goes right back to where it started. If it doesn't, fold it up, put it back on the shelf, let somebody else buy it. All the knits come in lots of different colors. The choice is totally up to you as to what solid color you want. If you choose to use a print, this is ITY fabric. You've heard of that a lot. And most of the ITY fabric does come in prints. So if your choice is a print, choose that fabric. Inside your case, you're going to find the DVD, obviously, because you're watching it. And you're going to find the pattern all folded up. I suggest you take that pattern out and you press it with your iron lightly. That way it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. When you open this up, you're going to find the front and the back and the sleeve, the chart to measure, and the chart to decide what size you're going to use. On the opposite side, you're going to find the Dolman Overlay, you're going to find the two cutting templates, and you're going to find a facing pattern. Facing pattern is used if you want to make a jacket or you want to make a blouse. Now, I would like to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Barbara. Barbara is a friend of mine from California, and I wish upon, hello, how are you? I wish upon all of you a Barbara. She's the best friend in the world, and the reason I say that is how many of you have friends that will allow them to be measured on film? And Barbara, you've done this a couple times, haven't you? Yeah, once or twice. Barbara goes with me to a lot of events, and it's really funny because people will come up to her and say, I've seen you before. And then she kind of laughs and says, yeah, on the DVD. So the first thing that I want to point out is that you have a chart on that pattern pattern, so make sure that's what you fill in. I'm going to fill yours in with pencil, so if you don't like it, you can erase it later. The first thing that we're going to measure is Barbara's bust, so just take your tape measure around the fullest part of you. Now, if you're doing this to yourself, look in the mirror and you can see exactly what that number is. I'm going to tell you that we are not making a couture garment. We are making a t-shirt. So these are just numbers. I know they count because we have to use them to draw the pattern. They have nothing to do with your comfort. We're going to go into the comfort in a minute. But you got to start with the numbers. So if you don't like the numbers, do it in pencil. You can erase it later. Okay, then we're going to take our waist measurements and write that down. And then we're going to do our shoulder measurement. Now, shoulders are something that confuse a lot of ladies, and I'm going to show you a little trick in just a second. But you want to go from the crook of the neck right to the shoulder point. So don't look at what she has on, because I'm going to go up here right to the shoulder point, and that's the number you're going to write down. Then we're going to do her tummy area. Stand on my own tape measure, excuse me. And write that down. And then we're going to do her hip area. Now, your hip area is the largest thing you own between your waist and your knees. I don't care if you sit on it, but you got to know what it is, because your shirt has to go around that. So you need to write that down. I suggest you write an arm width down. That's, some of you don't have that issue, some of you do, and I'm going to show you how to fix that in a second too. When you do that, put your arm next to your body, because that gives you a little bit more, a little bit better measurement. Now, the next two measurements are really important, so I'm going to go back to my tape and show you what I'm going to do with Barbara. I'm going to let you turn just this way, and then I'll reach across you. Is that okay? Sure. I'm going to show you that when you measure the front of you, the top of you, this is where this measurement doesn't change. This measurement, if you lose weight or gain weight, this measurement does not change. Your back does, but not this measurement. So I'm going to go from her armhole to her armhole. Now again, we're going to fit this in just a minute, so this can all be changed. And I'm going to measure her from there. So when I go from armhole to armhole, she measures 12 inches across the front. Now, if you will just turn around all the way to the back. Thank you, dear. And I'm going to put tape from here to here. Like this. You all have a bone in the back of your neck, all right? You want to go about 5 inches down from that bone, and that's where you're going to measure. So from here to here, Barbara measures 15 inches. So you see the difference? You're 12 in the front and 15 in the back. So that makes you one size in the front and one size in the back. That's an easy thing to fix, and I'll show you how to do that in a second when we draw the pattern. I'm going to take her sleeve measurement, so we're going to go from her shoulder, bend your elbow, and go to the wrist. And when we do that, that's a long sleeve measurement. I'm going to do a short sleeve and a 3/4 sleeve. Now, if you're doing this to yourself, that's kind of hard to bend your elbow and do that. So go get a shirt that you really like and measure the length of the sleeve. One little hint. Never stop a short sleeve garment at the same bust level, because it just makes you look broad. So I'm going to make you shorter because you're cute and young. So I'm going to make you look shorter than, yeah, no, you are, with the short sleeve. When you do the 3/4 sleeve, again, you want to measure on your arm. But if you don't have anybody to measure on your arm, then you want to go measure a garment. Top length. Let's talk a minute about top length. I hear a lot of ladies say, well, I'm going to make my top really long because it covers a multitude of sins. No, it doesn't. What it does is it hugs your rear end, and we don't want to do that. If you're going to make your garment long, I suggest that you make it tunic length. I like to do, if you just turn sideways for me just 1 second, I like to make the top of the garment right at the top of the largest part of the hip area. But it's your shirt, so you get to make it whatever length you want. If you want to kind of decide what length looks best on you, take your folded up pattern, turn sideways in the mirror, do this to it, and you can see the different lengths as to what looks best on your body or what you're more comfortable with. So on Barbara, we're going to measure over the bust down to the length that you want, and on Barbara it's 25 inches. So now we are ready to draw Barbara's pattern. Now we've done the hard part. We've measured Barbara. So now it's time to draw the pattern. But before we draw the pattern, I want to show you another chart that is on this pattern. This is a really important chart because it tells you what the garment is going to measure after it's sewn. It gives you some idea as to what your comfort level is. Remember I told you that's only numbers when you draw the pattern. This is the important part, is what's comfortable on your body. I suggest you get a t-shirt that you really like, that feels really comfortable, and you literally measure it. Measure it from the armhole to the armhole. That'll give you some guidance as to what size, as well as the numbers that you took when you measured. So if you look on this chart, you're going to see numbers on the far left-hand side. Those are the sizes of the pattern that I drew. When you look in the middle under the word bust, this is what the bust is going to measure for this size after it's sewn. Look on the far right, you find a chart. That's what it's going to measure in the hip after it's sewn. So if you look at Barbara's measurement, Barbara measures a 42. She is between sizes. She's between a 40 and a 42. If we made the 40, size 40 for Barbara, the bust would measure 41.5. That might be a little snug. So if she used the size 42, the bust would measure 44 after it's sewn. That's too big. Today we're going to go with the too big because I'm going to show you how to tweak this down to actually fit Barbara in her comfort area. So when you're drawing this off, if you're at all confused as to what size to make, I suggest you go with the higher size, not the lower size, because it's easier to take it in than it is to let this out. So before we get started on doing any of the drawing at all, let's fix just a few issues that we can see on Barbara. We're going to spot the issues by starting with Barbara. So we're going to have Barbara come back again, and I'm going to use my handy dandy tape. The first issue that a lot of ladies encounter is a rounded back. And if I just get Barbara to turn sideways, she doesn't have one, I have to tell you. But a lot of you have a really rounded back in this area. I don't like what that's really called. That's called a dowager's hump, and I don't think it's a nice word, so we're just going to call it a rounded back. So this is an area that you have to solve the problem. What happens when you have a rounded back, you don't have enough fabric to go around your neck, and that's what makes everything pull backwards. So if you have that issue that you're constantly rearranging the front of your shirt, that means you have a rounded back. The easy way to fix that is to add to the neck edge of the back only. And you can see that on the picture on the screen. The next issue that we're going to talk about are narrow shoulders. A lot of you are larger busted, but you have narrow shoulders. And Barbara has narrow shoulders. She's really has narrow shoulders. What happens when you have narrow shoulders is that you wind up with all this stuff right here. That's because not only is your shoulder narrow, your shorts, and I'm going to tape her up here. You don't mind if I put some more tape on you, do you? Yeah, this is nice tape. We're going to put some more yellow tape on her. When we do this, I think you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, again, with the picture that's up on the screen. When I go from the center of her shoulder down to her bust level, like this, I didn't get enough tape. Hold on. Now, you don't need to measure this because there's nothing to measure. This is a guessing game, and I'm going to show you how to guess when we sew it together. But if you're short between your shoulder and your bust, all of your fabric bunches up right here. Every time you make a garment, you got all this fabric right here. The way we're going to solve this is we're going to use a 1-inch seam allowance at the shoulder area only. This pattern has a half-inch seam allowance everywhere. Anytime you use this pattern, it's a 1/2 inch. But on the shoulder area, just the very first time we make the garment, we're going to use an inch seam allowance because what we're going to do is to bring this up and smooth all of this area out. So it's a really, really simple fix. You have that issue so that when we draw Barbara's pattern, I'm going to show you how you're going to fix that. Now, another issue that some of you may encounter, and we talked about this earlier, and I'm going to let you turn around one more time, Miss Barbara, thank you, is a broad back. That's really, really common. Again, that means one size in the front and one size in the back. So let me take Barbara up one more time to show you where I'm talking about. Now, when you make a garment, whether you're using knit or woven, and hopefully you're going to go into woven after you make your first knit, when you make a garment, this is where it pulls. You can't move like this. So we need to broaden this area. And when you broaden this area, it just gives you a whole lot more movement. Do you remember when we measured, we went from the bump in her neck, the bone that sticks out in her neck, about 5 inches down. Now, everybody is broad about 5 inches down. Some of us get broader as we go down our back, but most people are just broad about 5 inches down. So that's where we're going to fix that. Thank you. I'm going to turn you around one more time. The front of you never changes. That's going to stay the same whether you gain weight or you lose weight. The back of you, yes, it's going to change. If you lose weight like Barbara did, then you're going to be smaller in the back. If you gain weight, you're going to be broader, but you still have to move in that garment. When you work with a knit, that's nice because you've got a lot of ease in there. But when you take this pattern, like we're going to at the end of the DVD, when you take this pattern and you turn it in use it with woven fabric, that becomes a huge issue. So I'm going to show you how to make a front and a back. And today that's what we're going to do for you, is we're going to make a front pattern and a back pattern. The next issue is arms. Now, if you have large arms, I do want to tell you that I did solve some of that because I made that sleeve just a little bit bigger than you're going to find in most manufactured patterns. But if you need it bigger still, I'm going to show you a simple way to do it. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate it. We're going to come over here and I'm going to show you this sleeve pattern. Let me move this out of the way. What I want to suggest that you do is to make your sleeve pattern. And by the way, whatever number you wrote down as your arm measurement, if you have this issue, and you know what, I don't want to make trouble. You know if you have this issue in your garments that the sleeves are too tight. So if you have this issue, this is a really simple fix. All you need to do is measure. Make sure that you measure from arm's eye, and by the way, this is called an arm's eye, from arm's eye to arm's eye, to make sure that that sleeve is going to fit. You need about anywhere from 1 to 2 inches bigger than what your arm measures. Don't go adding a whole bunch because then you're going to take all day trying to get all that stuff out. So 1 to 2 inches bigger is fine. So if you need it bigger, I'm going to cut out my pattern, and this is out of Pattern-Ease. And then on the back of this pattern, I put a product called Frenchfuse. Frenchfuse is a tricot interfacing that irons on, and I just ironed it to the back of the pattern. It's a little bit easier to work with if you do that. Then take your scissors, and you're going to cut from the top of the sleeve to the bottom of the sleeve. But you're not going to cut through the cap, and you're not going to cut through the bottom. Then you're going to cut from arm's eye to arm's eye, but not all the way through. Now watch what you can do with this. You literally can pull this like this, and can you see how much area you're going to get in that sleeve? And this is going to give you a much fuller sleeve and a much more comfortable sleeve. The next issue that we want to talk about is tiny arms. And a lot of you have tiny arms. Big busted, tiny arms. That's the easy thing to fix. Make your seam allowance bigger. If you're working with a 1/2 inch seam and you think that sleeve is much too big, you literally can take a deeper seam just to tighten up that sleeve. So hopefully that will solve just a few issues. Now let's go back to our chart for just a second before we draw this pattern, because Barbara falls between sizes. If you look on this chart, Barbara's bust measured 42 inches. And if you look on this chart, she falls between a size 40 and a size 42. If I made her the size 40, that's 41.5 inches finished in the bust area. That might be a little too snug. If I use a size 42, it's 44 inches finished. That might be a little too big. So if I'm going to make an issue of it, I'd rather go bigger than smaller, because we can always take it in and again make it comfortable for Barbara. Now it's time to draw the pattern. I talked about this product earlier. This is called Pattern-Ease. I sell this on my website, and one of the things I love about Pattern-Ease, you see there's no lines on it. There's no dots, there's no grids, there's no lines on it at all. It comes 45 inches wide, so it really does a great job of making your patterns. Once you make this master pattern, you can make all kinds of things off of it. So you might want a couple of yards of this so that you can make more than one pattern. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it like this, because I like working with a whole pattern. I'm going to show you why in just a second. It's easier to work with a whole pattern than it is a half a pattern, because you remember I told you that I thought Barbara was going to need a different front than a back, and this is an easy way to do it. So we decided on Barbara that we were going to make a size 42 in her bust, but on her hip area, she's not that big, so we need to make a size 40 in the hip area. So can you see that I have this folded on the pattern? And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in this line with the arrows, and you need to write the word stretch. This is really important because everything in a knit top must stretch around your body. If you accidentally put the stretch going up and down, you won't be able to get into the shirt. So write the word stretch on there. That's really important. So I'm going to draw in the back, and I'm going to draw in the front, and I'm going to draw in her shoulder area. Now, Barbara measured for that third shoulder area, so I'm going to come down here like this, and I'm going to go out to the size 42. And it's clearly marked on the pattern. Go down just a little bit, because remember I told you her hips were smaller, so we're going to go down to the 40, and then I'm going to connect the two like this. All right? If you have a waistline, I don't, but congratulations if you do. If you have a waistline, you're going to want this tapered, but you can't taper it on the paper. You want to taper it in the fabric. Once we taper it, then you can go back and alter this pattern, but let's just keep a straight line when we're going to do our first garment. Then what you're going to do, remember Barbara measured 25 inches for a finished garment. I'm going to add 2 inches to that measurement, and my pattern is 27 inches, so that I know that that's going to fit her perfectly. So I'm going to draw the line down at the bottom, and that's how hard it is to make her shirt, the top pattern. This is the front and the back. Now, if you remember, Barbara had a different problem. She was broader across the back than she was in the front. So if you watch this, I'm going to take, can you see there are 4 lines here, and we use the third line on Barbara. I'm going to take this and I'm going to go like this and come down like this. This is going to be her front line, and this is going to be her back line. So can you see it's broader across the back than it is across the front? Now that's her front and back, and we have to have a sleeve. So all I have to do is to fold this patternese again like this. Let me move this over and draw in the sleeve, and the sleeve needs to match whatever size I used over there. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit, and we made a size 42. So like this, we just follow the lines. This is kind of like preschool stuff. Go to the size 42. Now, one thing you might want to do a little different. Remember I talked about larger arms. Instead of tapering like this, you might want to come down just a little bit straighter, because it's easier to take this in, remember, than to let this out. And we can taper this according to whatever Barbara's comfort level is. Now, on her short sleeve, we did her at 4 inches, so I'm giving her a 2-inch hem, so that's at 7. On her 3/4 sleeves, it was 18, so I'm going to give her 20. So all you have to do is to draw the straight lines across here like this, and the straight lines across here like this, and you're ready to cut out your pattern. Let's go back and talk about the pattern for just 1 minute, and this is for people that are either larger than this pattern or smaller than this pattern. If you look on the chart that we talked about earlier, the bust measurement on the largest size is 48.5 inches finished, and the hip is 49.5 inches finished. But let's just say that you're larger than those measurements. There is 1/2 inch between each one of these sizes. So if you're going to go up in size, all you need to do is add 1/2 inch for each size. So let's just say the largest size on here is 48.5. Let's make this easy on ourselves and call it 48. If it's 48, and let's just say you're 52. 48, 50, 52. That's 2 sizes. That equals 1 inch. So when you lay your pattern trace on top of there, all you have to do is to add 1 inch right here at the arm's eye. Remember, we talked about the arm's eye. And let's just say that the same thing happened on your hip area. You're going to add 1 inch to your hip area. So when you draw this pattern, all you have to do is extend the arm's eye out to this line and draw it straight down, and again for your hem. Now whatever you added to your pattern, you also need to add to your sleeve, because that sleeve has to fit into that armhole. So if I added 1 inch here, I need to add 1 inch here to the same thing. So just keep that in mind. Now let's just say that you're smaller than this pattern. Let me tell you, you cannot make this pattern a child size. Reason being, children's armholes and sleeves, they don't equal an adult. So you can go down to a preteen, but I wouldn't keep trying to make this into a child size because it's not going to work. But again, you can see the smallest size in the bust is 32 inches. If you're less than 32 inches, you're going to take that much off. So let me show you how you would draw something like that. I'll take my tape again and show you on this pattern. You would just come in the size as opposed to out the size. So you can keep adding to this pattern as much as you want, and it's amazing how beautifully this fits. Just keep in mind, you always, whatever you add to the side seam, you have to add to the side of the sleeve. Okay, so now we've cut the front and the back out, and you can see this is a whole pattern that we're going to be working with, all right? So the next thing we need to do is to cut out our sleeve. Now you remember that we made Barbara a size 42 in the bust area, so that sleeve has to fit into that armhole. So take the remainder of your patternese, fold it in half like this, and we're going to lay it on, just fold it like this. We're going to lay it on the sleeve. Now, I did not use the pattern weights when I cut out the top, the front and the back, but I need them for here because this wants to slide away from me because it's a smaller area. I would suggest that you use the pattern weights anytime you can. Again, we're going to draw in the line right here, and we're going to put the word stretch. If you do not remember, you have a hard time remembering, you may want to write on here, this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And that way when you pick up this pattern, you will remember that. So I'm just going to, again, follow the lines like this. And I'm going right over to the size 42 and draw down. Now, I'm going to suggest that you add just a little bit to the width of this sleeve at the bottom. And I'm going to add about 1 inch. My pattern fit Barbara's sleeve length perfectly. If you need to add, you're going to add down here. There's no line up here that you're going to add. So all I'm going to do is to take this and connect the two. If you have a hard time doing this, use a yardstick or a ruler to help you. So that's her sleeve pattern. You remember that on Barbara, we did a short sleeve, we did a 3/4 sleeve, and we did a long sleeve. So I'm going to add 2 inches to each of those measurements. So on her short sleeve, she wanted a finished 5 inches, so we're going to make that 7. On her 3/4 sleeve, she wanted a finished 18 inches, so I'm going to make that 20. And this is her long sleeve. Then all you have to do is to take your yardstick and draw a straight line at those lines that you marked. If you have a hard time drawing, literally, you're following the lines. You're not creating anything differently. You're just following the lines. I love children's washable markers. When I teach classes, when I go out in the stores and teach classes, I usually suggest people bring children's washable markers. And this is the reason. When you use children's washable markers, if you get any marker on your fabric at all, it can wash off. If you get it on your hands, it can wash off. The permanent markers, they're sharper, and that's why I'm using it so that you all can see, but they also will not remove very easily. So I really do suggest that you do that. Now we're just going to cut this sleeve out like this. And like this. This is one of the reasons, let me show you, that I love Kai scissors, because I can literally do that with them. So they really do cut beautifully. Again, I'm going to have a whole sleeve. If you were larger in that pattern, you may not have enough patternese for a whole sleeve, so I suggest you get yourself another length of it. Now, I have the front and the back. So let me show you how we're going to make this different front and back. We're going to remove the pattern from the table so you can see better. And this is my front and back. I told you to cut on the outside lines, which is what we did, but can you see there's another line right here? This is the way you make a front. All I'm going to do is to cut right on that line, but you're not going to cut all the way through. So when I lay this out on the table, I will show you that this is the back. Flip this down, and that is the front. Back, front. That easy? This is a whole sleeve. So these are the only two pieces that we're going to need to make our first basic shirt. Now let's talk just a little bit about yardage, because yardage is one of those things you're really familiar with, turning the pattern over on the back side and seeing the yardages. On the back side of my case that you see, it will tell you to buy anywhere from 1.5 yards to 2 yards of 60-inch wide fabric. But let's go a little further, because a lot of you ladies like to travel and you go into other places and you go into fabric stores. You need to buy the length that you're going to make. So if you will think about it in terms of lengths as opposed to yardages, if I take a tape measure and measure from the center of my shoulder and go down to as long as I want the shirt to be, and I'm going to refer back to Barbara, that was 25 inches. Add 2 inches for the hem, and you've got 27 inches. That is one length. That's going to be for her front. She needs another length for her back. So this 27 and 27 equals 1.5 yards. Barbara wants short sleeve, she needs to add another 1/4 yard. She wants long sleeve, she needs to add another 1/2 yard. So if you think about things in lengths as opposed to yardages, it's a lot easier. Let's just say you're going to make a dress. You find fabric you fall in love with and you want to make a dress. Measure from the center of your shoulder to as long as you want the dress to be. That's one length. Yeah, that's for your front. Another length for your back. Another length for your sleeve. So never go anywhere without a tape measure in your purse. I don't ever leave the home without one. But just think in lengths as opposed to yardages. It's a whole lot easier. So now that we have the pattern all cut out, we are ready to lay this on fabric and cut our fabric. This is our knit. We have it folded in half, so the selvage to the selvage. Again, before you cut, make sure that this is the greatest amount of stretch, which is you can see that it is. Now I have 1.25 yards here because Barbara wants short sleeves. There was no reason to buy any more than that. So let me show you how I'm going to lay this out. And by the way, you are welcome to use a rotary cutter if you want to. I like Kai's rotary cutters if you haven't tried them. The reason that you can use a rotary cutter, if you're adapt to using one, that's great. I don't have a cutting mat under here, so I'm going to use scissors. So what I'm going to do is to take this pattern and I'm going to open it up so I can cut 2 pieces at one time. Now I'm a thrifty person, just like you're a thrifty person, so I'm going to move it towards the selvage and keep the folded edge where I get the most amount of fabric. Take your pattern weights. All you need to do is to put your pattern weights right down the center when you're ready to cut. So we're going to cut these two together. Remember I told you Barbara wanted short sleeves. So as I look at the pattern, I drew the line for short sleeves. You can literally cut that off if you want to, but I'd really rather not because I don't want to lose the rest of the sleeve. So all I have to do is to fold it like this and take all of this excess like this and fold it up out of your way. Now you could pin this or tape this or however you wanted to do it, but there's no reason to make a whole new pattern unless everything you do you want to be short sleeve. Can you see that I can lay this right on top and I still have plenty of room for my strips when I start to make my necklines. We cut the front and the back together, so we have 2 pieces and both pieces look just like this. So we have to make this into a front. And the way to do that is to fold it in half like this and take your pattern, lay it on top of, back on top of your fabric. And remember that little flip down place? We're going to flip this down like this And we're going to cut out the neck like this, following that line. And bingo, we have a front and we have a back. So now we're ready to sew this together. Now we're ready to sew the shoulder seams, and that's the first thing that we're going to do. If you have no issues with any bunching up here, when we talked about the issues, then you're going to sew your shoulder seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we can come back and check those issues in just a second. But we already knew on Barbara, we were going to do that 1 inch seam allowance. Let me give you a little hint about your sewing machine, because it's going to make your sewing easier. We like easy. On most sewing machines, you can literally move the needle. I'm going to move the needle on this machine all the way over to the left. When you move the needle, you can guide your fabric right next to the edge of the foot, and guess what? That's your 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it allows you to sew a whole lot faster. So we're going to go ahead and sew the shoulder seams together. If you have no issues with a bunch in here, you're going to sew the shoulder seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We decided that Barbara did, and she was short between her shoulder and her bust. If you're unsure, we all know the word baste, and baste means your longest stitch length on your sewing machine, because if you're wrong, guess what? You get to rip it out very, very quickly. So I am going to baste this with a 1 inch seam allowance. Now remember, I'm not doing a 1/2 inch, I'm doing a 1 inch seam. So I'm going to make my stitches a lot longer. So when you sew, all you're going to do is your 1 inch seam allowance. Now if the two edges of the neck do not measure, you want to stretch them just slightly so that they do. And once you have that done, we are ready to try this on and tweak it. We have basted these shoulders together with a 1 inch seam. Can you see how funny looking the neckline is going to be? So don't panic at that, because we're going to cut all that off in just a second. So I'm going to call Barbara back. And I know you've got beautiful hair, but do you mind putting that over your head? This is what I want you to do at home. I want you to put this over your head. I want you to stand in front of a mirror, all right? And we're going to look at a couple of things. I'll straighten this up on you. Okay. First of all, when I raise Barbara's arm, can you see this arm's eye that we talked about earlier is right in her armpit? If this arm's eye was up here, go take that basting stitch out. It's too much. If your arm's eye is down here and you've sewn with a 1/2 inch seam, you need another 1/2 inch seam, because you can even see with nothing sewn, sleeve sewn in, how this is going to lay really nice. So the inch seam works great on you. We need to alter your pattern accordingly. You're going to stand in front of a mirror and you're going to draw on you where you want the sleeve to actually be stitched in. So Barbara doesn't stand in front of a mirror, so I'm going to draw on you for you, okay? So if you look at this armhole right now, or where the sleeve would go in, can you see that it's hanging way over her arm? So she's got all these creases in here. So what I'm going to do is to draw a line where I want that sleeve to actually be stitched. Now to this line, we need to add a seam allowance, because you got to have something to sew it in too. But this is easier for you to see in the mirror. Can you see that? So if I had a sleeve sewn in right here, can you see how much smoother that front would look? So that proves to me that you have a totally different front than you have a back. So let me turn Barbara around and show you that her back is perfect. She has plenty of room in the back of her shirt. So let's just say you don't have plenty of room. You don't have a choice in this garment. We're going to go with the garment because you can't cut out another back unless you have more fabric. I will show you how to alter this, and it is one of your PDFs, how to broaden the back. But you can see in Barbara, she's got plenty of movement. If you had too much fabric, you're back to doing exactly the same thing. You would follow that line and come in here like this. And I'm going to let you turn around there we go. And when you would come in like that. Now, Barbara can't do that. She can't afford to do that. You can see right here, that is your 1/2 inch seam allowance. So she's going to have plenty of room to move. Thank you, Barbara. If you marked on yourself with the chalk, you need to lay your garment back down again and remark where that seam allowance is, because what we're going to do is we're literally going to remove this part. Now, you have two sleeves, two armholes. So fold your garment in half like this so that you can cut them both at the same time. So let me fold this like this. And you can see that this was the line that we drew on Barbara. This is the line that we're going to cut off, okay? So let me cut that piece off, because this is going to be your template, your personal template to alter your pattern. So I'm going to cut off this piece like this. And I had to go just a little bit into the back so that the shoulders would match. So there's your template as to how to alter that pattern. So let's go back to the pattern, and you remember that Barbara had used a 1-inch seam allowance. So I need to remove a 1/2 inch. Always make sure your pattern goes back to that 1/2 inch seam allowance. That way there's no guesswork. If you sew this today and then don't pick it up for a couple of weeks, there's no guesswork. Everything goes back to a 1/2 inch. And I will encourage you to alter it as you sew it, because you won't remember what you did. So I'm going to take off that 1/2 inch. Now I have a funny looking neck, right? So I'm going to take our handy dandy scotch tape this back together, the whole neck edge back together, like this. Cut this little piece off, like this. And you can see I've got it all back together. Now, remember we said Barbara needs a front and a back. So this is how you're going to do the front and back. Put your scissors in the middle, right along that fold line, and cut right up the center, like this. This is her back. Cut off the entire thing. Now you don't need a little wedge. And this is her front. So now we have a 1/2 back and a 1/2 front. This now becomes the fold line. So I would suggest you write that on there, fold, because now you need to lay that on the fold of your fabric. So we have an actual front and an actual back. Now the only other thing that we do need to do is we need to lower this neck edge, because when you cut off the shoulder, you distorted that. So all we have to do is to cut off a 1/2 inch of the back neck edge, like this, and cut off a 1/2 inch of the front neck edge, like this. Now that takes care of the neck. Now let's take care of the shoulders so that we have a nicer fit. Remember what I just cut off of the pattern, or the garment? That's your template. So this is the front. We know this is the front because we've taken off a whole lot more. So all we have to do is to lay this on here like this. If you don't feel comfortable simply cutting, you can take a pencil or a marker and mark exactly where that is. I'm just going to cut right next to there like that. And this now is her altered front. I'm going to take the back and I'm going to lay that on the pattern as well. Again, if you don't feel comfortable, take a pencil and draw around it. Cut on that line. And this is now Barbara's altered pattern. Now we're ready to do some necklines. We're going to start with Chanel trim. That's the first one. We're going to scoop out the neckline, and then we're going to move into a V-neck. If you turn your pattern over to the other side, the opposite side of where we do the front and the back, you will find templates. The templates do a V-neck and a scoop neck, but you don't even have to use the templates if you don't want to. That is totally up to you. Some people like a really high U neckline, so you're the designer, you get to choose. So let's go back to that mirror, take your tape measure, put your tape measure right in the hole of your neck, right here, and decide how low you want that garment to be. If I go to where I am right now, that's 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I have my front and back, I have my seam allowance to my shoulder pressed open, and I'm going to measure down 4 inches. Now, I'm going to draw this with chalk. If you feel comfortable, just go right ahead and cut it. But if you don't feel comfortable, draw it with chalk, because you can always redraw if you don't think you have a really good neckline. Or you can use that template, like I said. Now, I want to point out that this is not even. The neckline is not even, and that's because if you remember, we did an inch seam allowance, so it threw that neckline off. So what we're going to do now is to neat up the neckline. So I'm going to cut on that line that I just drew, like this, and I just kneaded, N-E-A-T, kneaded up the neckline. Now guess what I just did? I now have a template for my next garment. So keep the templates, then if you like this when it's all through, you'll know exactly how low to cut your next one. Now I need to know how much is going to go in here. Now let me explain where Chanel trim came from. Coco Chanel. She had very plain, simple garments with a plain, simple finish. So they named this application after her. This is not anything you buy extra. It's done with your knit fabric, and you can see on this one, I have a really big contrast on this one, but it's done with your knit fabric. It's just the way to cover a cut edge. Chanel trim is good for a lot of different things. One of the things I love the most about it is that if you're working with a woven fabric and say you want to make a dress, like there's a dress on variation 1, if you lower the neckline and use a sleeveless, want to make a sleeveless dress, you can finish the armhole and the neckline with a strip of knit, and that's your Chanel trim. So this is a really good application. Now I need to know how much this opening is, all right? There is a rule to knits. Whatever goes into the hole of a knit must be smaller than the hole itself. This is a hole. This is a hole, your armhole is a hole, and the bottom of your garment is a hole. So if you're going to put something into it, it must be smaller than what that hole measures. Reason being, if you don't, it's not going to lay next to your body, it's going to fall away from your body, and that's not very attractive. So when you measure, you want to stand the tape measure up. Never lay a tape measure down that's not accurate. So I'm going to start in the center back, and I'm going to stand the tape measure up like this, and I'm going to go all the way around, and I have 12 inches. That is 1/2 of the neckline. So the entire neckline measures 24 inches. I want to remove 1 inch, so I need to cut a strip of fabric that is 23 inches long and 3 inches wide. And I have one of those cut right here. So this is 23 inches long, the length is on the stretch, and 3 inches wide. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this strip in half, right side to right side, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I have a tube of fabric or a circle of fabric. Then I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to quarter the neckline. So I'm going to put a pin in the center back and a pin in the center front. And then I'm going to take those 2 pins and I'm going to put them together like this. And there is the center of those 2 pins. It is always in front of the shoulder seam. The shoulder seam is not the center of the neckline, so don't use it like that. So I'm going to put a pin in here like this. Then I'll open this up and show you. And a pin in here like this. Now I have quartered the neck edge, and this is what it looks like. All right, so pins at 4 equal distances. Now what I'm going to do is to take that strip of fabric that I've already done a 1/2 inch seam. All right, so if you remember rightly, the neck edge measured 24, the strip measured 23 by 3. I took a 1/2 inch seam. Now this measures 1 inch less. So now I'm down to 23 inches for the neck edge, or for the strip. No, I'm down to 22. I'm sorry, I'm down to 22. So now I have to quarter this. All right, so I'm quartering my circle. You already know that's going to be the center back. And we have pins at 4 equal distances. This is a really, really great trick, especially when you're covering the cut edge of an armhole, because you want that to lay next to your body, not gape away. Now all I have to do is to match the pins. So let me turn this inside out like this because it's easier to work inside the hole, and the hole is the neck edge. The seam in the center goes in the back of the garment, right side to right side. Put the pins in like this. And once we get these pins in, I'm going to show you how much you need to stretch. So if you look at it like this, you can see how much I'm going to have to stretch. I'm going to have to stretch the blue to meet the amount of purple above it. Now when you sew like this, you want to sew with this strip on the bottom next to your sewing machine and your garment on the top. The reason being, you don't ever want to stretch at your neck edge. So if you have this on the bottom, you have a little bit more control over it. So we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've taken my jacket off so you could see my neckline and my armhole. Both areas have been finished with chenille trim. Remember I told you about whatever goes into the hole of a knit must be smaller than the hole itself? Well, this is smaller, so that's why it lays next to my neck. If you look at my armholes, I don't have any darts in this garment at all. That chenille trim brings that armhole in next to my body. So it gives you a really nice smooth look. So we've cut that out, we stitched that strip on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to fold that strip right over the cut edge of this shirt. So you can see there's your 3 inches. We're going to fold this over the edge like this, and we're going to pin it all the way around. And then we're going to do something called stitch in the ditch. Now the ditch is where these two pieces of fabric are joined together. You can see the difference in the color, so that's easy for you to see. A lot of you have feet on your sewing machine specifically made for stitch in the ditch. They're called stitch in the ditch feet. So you can use those if you want to. When you stitch in the ditch, if you find that really difficult to stay in that ditch, you literally can stitch up on the trim itself like I have right here. Now I've done this in purple so that you all could see it, but you can see that you could do it in the aqua color and it would basically disappear. After you've stitched in the ditch or up on the trim, whichever you want to do, what you're going to do is to go to the inside and we're going to cut away any excess. When you do this, take your scissors and angle them. Put your hand in it like this because you don't want to cut your garment. You only want to cut the trim. Now you spent all this time putting the garment together, so let's don't cut it. And when I do this, I'm just going to cut all the way around the neck edge with my scissors angled. And that is as easy as it is to get this chenille trim look. This is Sophia fabric. And remember we pulled that neckline, right? So I want to show you what's going to happen. Can you see that you've got some gathers in here or some extra fabric? I want to show you how wonderful Sophia fabric works. We're going to press it out. When you press a knit, make sure the front and the back are together. Don't put it on over your ironing board single layer. You want to make sure the front and back are together because that's going to allow you to press and get a beautiful flat edge. And I'm just going to show you one side of this and show you how pretty this is. Can you see how pretty the Sophia presses out? So again, when you press, work from the bottom up and press into the neck to get that really nice flat look. Now that we've learned the beautiful chenille trim, let's do a V-neck. You can either do a crossover V like this one, or you can do a mitered V like this one. I'm going to show you both of them. And again, all of this is on the printable documents where you can follow along and read along if you want to. The first thing you have to do is lower the neck edge. So we have to cut this into a V. On the back of the pattern, you have a template, and the template will show you the V-neck cut at different levels. You need to decide how low you want that to be. But I do want to show you that you're going to be putting something back in. So make sure you cut it low enough that when you put a trim back in, the neckline isn't too high. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to stand in front of the mirror. I'm going to decide exactly how low I want the finished garment to be. And I'm going to say 4 again. So that means I need to cut this neckline down 5 inches. Because remember, I'm going to put that trim back in. If you don't feel comfortable, draw it. You can actually draw this on your fabric with that chalk marker. I'm going to measure down 5 inches. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut as a V. And when I do that, I'm going to go back again and neat up the neckline, just like we did on that scoop neck when we did that a second ago. Now here's the best part. There's your template. So if you make another V-neck, you have your template. Don't throw your little pieces away. Now in the V-neck, one of the things you need to do is to clip in that V. You want to clip about a 1/2 inch down. If you don't clip, you're going to have a little pucker right where the V is. We need to know how big the strip is to go back into that. So I'm going to stand the tape measure up again, and I am going to measure the neck edge. And this neck edge measures again 24 inches. So it's 12 and 12 is 24. This time you're going to cut a strip that's 3 inches wide and 1 inch longer than that neck edge. So I want to cut a strip 3 inches wide and 25 inches long. That's because you have tails when you do a V-neck. So I'm going to lay this down. It can be bigger than you need. You can be much bigger than you need, but it can't be shorter, so that's why you want to measure. I'm going to lay this down and cut this strip like this. Take it to your ironing board and press a crease in it. Now you have a trim, and it's a finished edge, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do, remember we did that clip. When we start sewing, we're going to start right at the bottom of that clip. So here's your clip. This is right at the bottom. When you put your strip down, make sure you keep a 1 inch tail. You're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam, and you're going to stretch the strip slightly as you go up the neck edge. Stop when you get to the shoulder seam. Stretch a lot across the back. Stop when you get to the next shoulder seam and stretch slightly as you go down the other side. Only this time, you're not going to stitch all the way to the point. You're going to leave about a 2 inch hole, okay? Because this is where we're going to cross over. So let me turn this right side out and show you exactly what this is going to look like. There is the hole. So I'm going to put this inside like this, and then I'm going to take this tail that we have and tuck it right underneath like this. Pick this up, and that is what creates your crossover V. That's how simple that is. Now you have to close up the hole. So what I'm going to do is to pull it back like this and stitch from here to the point, catching all of this fabric, and that will close up the hole. And that's as simple as a crossover V is. Now let me show you how to make a mitered V, because it's just as simple. The only difference in a mitered V is you start at the clip. This time you actually end at the clip. So I'm going to use a pin to put in here. I lost my pins. Here they are. Let me put a pin in here instead of sewing it. I'm going to put a pin in here to show you where it would be sewn. And then I'm going to show you a really quick trick. This is a product called a glue stick. You will be amazed how much you use this glue stick. So what I'm going to do is to fold this back down inside here, and you'll be able to see that I'm going to miter a V. Now when I miter the V, I'm going to put this edge down inside. Let me lay this out neat. And the mitered part will be right here. So I'm going to take it to the ironing board and fold this back until I'm really, really happy with it. And once you're really happy with the way the miter looks, put this to the inside. You're going to glue it. You're literally going to glue that strip down. Press it really good. You will have a crease in it. When you see your crease, take this to the ironing board and stitch right where your crease is, and you will have a perfect mitered V. It's just as simple as that. Now that you've chosen whichever neck you want to do, whether you want to do the Chanel trim or the V-neck or the mitered neck, that was easy, wasn't it? We're going to finish this shirt. So we're going to take the sleeve, and I want to show you the parts of the sleeve that are important. We've already talked earlier about an arm's eye. That's this point. Well, you have that same point on your garment. So you want to make sure that you know that word, because in just a second, we're going to use it. So I'm going to take this sleeve and fold it in half like this, and I'm going to put a pin in the center. The shoulder seam is the center of the armhole. So I'm going to pin this to the shoulder seam like this. And then I'm going to put the arm's eye of the sleeve to the arm's eye of the garment, right side to right side, and put a pin in this. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and put a pin in that. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are pinners, but hopefully I can get you out of that, because this is not a place to pin. If you pin your whole sleeve in there, you will no longer be able to stretch. So I don't really want you to pin. If you feel really uncomfortable about this, pin just the cap of the sleeve, but leave this part so we can stretch. That's the whole point of using the knit. So when you put this under your machine, you want to put it under your machine with your sleeve looking at you. So sleeve is on the top. And you're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to go to that center pin, and I'm literally going to stretch both pieces until they fit together. Now here's another little trick so that you don't sew with pins. Your left hand becomes your pins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the edges and hold them, line up the edges and hold them, and line up the edges. As you sew, you let it out, let it out, let it out. You don't need any pins whatsoever. So it's just a quicker, faster way to sew, and believe me, a much easier way to sew. So I'm going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam until I get right to that shoulder seam, and then I will stop. Can you see that I'm just letting this out with my left hand? Now this is when a lot of you use sergers, and this is fine if you use a serger, but I'm going to recommend you don't use your serger. Yes, I love my serger. Don't use your serger on your first garment. Do this on the sewing machine. Reason being, if you need to, you can take your seams out. Serger is a little bit harder to take them out. I'm going to stop at the shoulder seam. Put your needle in, because your needle is your third hand. Pick up the other arm's eye, and again, you're going to stretch that sleeve to meet the armhole. And sew with another 1/2 inch. And that's how easy it is to put in a perfect set-in sleeve. That easy? Perfect set-in sleeve. Now we're going to sew the side seams. When you sew the side seams, you only need 1 pin. Believe it or not, that's all you need. So we're going to put this right side to right side. Take the seam allowance of the sleeve and make that go into the sleeve. 1 pin, and that's going to hold the seam allowance right here. Go to the bottom of your garment, and we're going to sew from the bottom all the way through the sleeve. We've finished the neck edge, we sewed in both sleeves, and we've sewn both side seams. And it's time to tweak the garment. Now this is what I want to ask you to do. First of all, I want you to keep in mind this is not a couture garment. This is a t-shirt. So when you put this on, I want you to be nice to yourself. There's little bitty things you need to take in, or fix little bitty things. So I'll show you how we're going to do that. Put the garment on, look in the mirror, and be honest with yourself about what you need to take in. If you have a friend with you, it's really easy because she can pin that on you. If you're doing it to yourself, what I would suggest you do is keep in mind you've used a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if you want to take this in, if you think your garment's too big, do it in 1/2 inch increments. Do both sides. Don't try to do one side and then fit the other. You're going to do both sides, baste it together, because you can always pull your seam, that basting stitch out. So Barbara has now put her shirt on. Doesn't she look gorgeous? Welcome back, Barbara. And we're going to, first let's talk about the sleeves, because the sleeves are much too long on her, but they fit really nice. Do they feel comfortable?
Yeah.
And you can see how beautiful the neck edge is. Let me show you some of the things that we did with this. Remember, we took in the shoulder seam, so she's got a nice flat shoulder here. She doesn't have all the bunchies at her sleeve. Where we've actually set the sleeve in looks really, really good on her. It looks good in the front and it looks good in the back. Now, this is your shirt, not my shirt. So I'm going to suggest to you that I think it's a little big. And I think what we need to do is to take in the side seams just so we get rid of some of these lines. And you can see if I just hold it just like that. Just by taking in the side seam, that's going to make a big difference. If you have a friend with you, obviously it's a lot easier for your friend to pin this for you. But if you're by yourself, all you have to do is to do this in 1/2 inch increments. If Barbara were looking in a mirror right now and she was all by herself, she could see that she would want to take in this side seam up to about the bust level. Baste it in, very simple to take it out if you're wrong. So once we do that, I think you've got a gorgeous shirt and a gorgeous pattern, so we've done that. You now have a front and a back to your pattern, and you have the sleeve pattern.
Okay.
Let's look at the length of the sleeve that Barbara has on because she's already got the shirt on. And if I roll this up, and believe me ladies, it's a whole lot easier to roll up a shirt than it is to kind of turn under the hem. So if I roll this up, I think this is a really good length on you because it's a really cute short sleeve. That's about 4 inches that we need to remove off of your actual pattern itself, and then you'll have a really nice hem. As far as the length of it goes, you can see that when Barbara turns this up 2 inches, she's going to have exactly the length that we had measured her for to begin with. So these are just little tweaks that she's going to do. Taking the side seam up to about the bust area, cut off the sleeve, we don't need all this length, and turn up the hem, and we're ready to stitch the hem in. I told you to add 2 inches to the length of whatever finished garment that you wanted. So these are the 2 inches that Barbara was happy with. We're going to press those 2 inches up, fold it up on your ironing board, take your iron and press that hem in. All right. Now, here's a little trick. Every foot has 2 toes. And what happens is most of you try to sew right on that cut edge. And when you do, you wind up with a ruffle. And you press it, and there's no way out. And once you've ruffled a knit, you've ruffled a knit. So we don't want to do that. I suggested 2 inches addition because what I want you to do is to press this really good. But I want you to sew 1 inch away from the folded edge, not 2 inches away. So when we sew, we're actually going to sew 1 inch away from that folded edge. When you do that, when you put your foot down, you're going to have both toes of that foot on 2 levels of fabric or 2 layers of fabric. That's not going to ruffle or pull or anything else. You can do 2 rows of stitches if you want to. You could use your serger and do a cover stitch here if you wanted to. That is totally up to you. Once you have finished stitching, then you're going to cut away or trim away any excess that's right next to your stitching line. Do exactly the same thing for the sleeves that you've done for the bottom, and you're going to have a beautiful garment that everybody's going to say, "Oh, did you make that?" You're going to say, "Yes, I did." I'm going to show you a wonderful variation, and it's right on the back side of your pattern, and that's this Dolman Overlay. The Dolman Overlay gets you a different look in your garment, and I promised you in the very beginning to take you on a creative tour. This is one of the first creations that you can make. So I want to show you what a dolman sleeve looks like. A dolman sleeve has no armhole. So if you look at it like this, you've got the sleeve and the garment all as one. It's a great armhole, or it's a great sleeve, especially if you happen to have large arms, because you have no hindrance of an armhole at all. Dolman sleeves are really popular right now, and they're very, very comfortable. But a lot of people, when they think of dolman sleeves, they think of bat sleeves. Years ago, there used to be a sleeve that went from your shoulder to your waist, and it looked like you had bat wings. Very, very, very unattractive. So I'm going to show you how to take this dolman sleeve and tailor it just a little bit. Now, this was Barbara's shirt pattern. So I'm going to lay this and line up these neck edges like this. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is to take another piece of pattern ease and lay this on the fold over the top of it, because what I'm going to cut is a new pattern, but it will just be an overlay. You don't need to make the whole pattern, unless of course you want to make a whole bunch of these, then you can. There are two lines on this Dolman overlay. One says it's for a jacket and the other one says it's for a top. Again, that's going to be back to your decision. You can add a whole lot more if you use the line all the time for the jacket. That just gives you a little bit more. Can you see where Barbara's shirt is right here? I'm going to draw this in so that you can see this. This is where her actual shirt is. So I don't want to have all of this excess fabric here. All I have to do is to start and go just like that. So that now becomes my Dolman overlay. Again, put your line on there and write the word stretch. And that's your Dolman overlay. So when you cut this out, all you have to do, let me remove this and show you that when you cut a garment out, you can lay this right on top of your garment, cut it as one piece, just like this, and you're going to have the shirt that I showed you earlier. And that's what the shirt's going to look like. We did a crossover V and we did a mitered V, and both times we put a strip back into the V-neck. What happens if you want a V-neck that has no strip added to it? You need to make a facing, and that's what I have in this top. So I'm going to show you how to make your own facing. So what I have here is another shirt that's been cut into a V. So I need to fill this up. And if you remember the rule, whatever goes into the hole of a knit must be smaller than the hole itself. So I'm going to take another piece of knit, make sure that the stretch goes with the stretch. I'm going to fold it in half and I'm going to create a facing. So all I have to do is to take my garment. You can see I have this folded. Take my garment and lay the folded edge of the front on the fold. Just line up the folds like this. Take your chalk and trace around the neck edge. Make sure you include the shoulder seam. Now you can eyeball this, or you can actually take your tape measure and measure it. I'm going to draw the shoulder seam, and I'm going to draw about 2 to 3 inches away. There's your facing. So let me cut this out like this. And that's your front neck facing. Very simple. Now we need a back neck because we had a back to it as well. So again, you're going to take your back, lay it on the fold like this, line up the folds. This is easy. Draw your neck edge like this. Again, draw your shoulder seam. Make sure that they're going to match, because you want to make sure you got them to match when you sew them together. And now you have a back neck facing. Now here's the trick to doing this. There's the front neck facing. I'm going to lay it down like this. Here's the back neck facing. And that's going to go on top like that. Okay? But here's the trick to this. Remember I said whatever goes into the hole of a knit, yada yada yada, must be smaller than the hole itself. I'm going to fold this one in half and I'm going to remove a 1/2 inch. I'm going to fold this one in half and I'm going to remove a 1/2 inch. Now when you sew this back into your garment, you are going to be forced to stretch this neck right in this area and across the back, because now this is smaller than the neck edge of your garment. But I promise you it's going to lay perfectly flat. So we're going to take this to our garment, and I'm going to open this up, and I'll just show you the front. You're going to lay it right side to right side like this, and you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once it's sewn, press it to the inside and you have a beautiful flat edge with no filler. So we had fun putting your top together, and now you have a master top pattern. So I want to show you how to take that master top pattern, which includes a front and a back and a sleeve, and turn it into all different kinds of garments. These are variations, variation 1 through 5, and I designed these variations very simple, easy directions to follow. There are over 100 different garments that you can make off of these variations, and you're making it with your master pattern, the one you've been working on that fits you perfectly. Now let me show you how very quickly to take just some triangles and rectangles and turn that basic top into a fun garment. Let me tell you how to just add just a simple right angle to both sides of your knit top pattern just to get the look that Barbara has on. I call it the Teresa top. I used ITY fabric to create it. She has the scoop neckline with Chanel trim and 3/4 sleeves. Isn't that pretty? This is the same Teresa top. We've added the right angles to both sides again, only this time I lengthened it to tunic length, and you have the Teresa vest. Isn't that cool looking? Love it. You look beautiful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a rectangle, 9 by 10 inch rectangle of patternese. Lay that right next to the side seam of your front pattern. And when you cut it out, you're going to cut it all as one piece. So you can see what Barbara's holding out. That's the front. And then we have added the same thing to the back piece. So it's all cut as one. The other side of this garment is cut perfectly straight. We haven't added anything to it. Now watch what happens when Barbara ties the side. You get that beautiful asymmetrical look. This is from variation 5, and now I've used a woven fabric. This is wool. I've added to the side seams and to the underarm seam of the sleeve to give me a little bit extra fabric because this would be going over something else. But I did something a little bit special. I added 4 inches, which gave me an 8-inch pleat in the back of this coat. So that gives a whole lot more room. It gives almost a swing effect to the back of the coat, but you have a whole lot more room to move in. This time we have the 3-hour coat. Now this is a double-faced wool, and a double-faced wool means that it's one color on one side and one color on the other. You can make this out of any kind of fabric. I want you to notice that it's cut edges again. We don't have any hem, we don't have any facing. What makes the lapels is that right angle that we used on that Teresa top earlier. I've used that at the lapels to give you that different kind of look. The sleeve is simply cut. That gives you that V look. And in the back, I added another one of those pleats, the extra fabric for the pleat, only this time I put a zipper in that pleat. So you want extra movement? Just unzip it. This is my jacket to tote. This is the very first garment that I ever designed. And I want to tell you, I'm very hot-natured. And usually when I would take my jacket off, I would wrap it around my waist. I got news for you. That's hot too. So what I decided to do was to put a pocket on the back of my jacket. And all I have to do is to reach down inside the pocket like that and stuff the entire jacket inside there. You did not see the strap that was in there, and what I have is a jacket to tote. I love stripes, but as a big girl, I was always told big girls don't wear stripes. Yes, they do. It just depends on where you put the stripes. And if you look at this shirt, which I call the seaside top, this is on variation 5. I love the different directions of the stripe. You could do it in 2 different colors. It's just a fun way to wear the stripes and have it broken up just a little bit. Now I want you to notice the buttons. I love the buttons on this shirt, but they're really heavy. And what holds these buttons really nice and flat is I just put a little strip of Frenchfuse right over that seam allowance, so that makes the buttons lay nice and flat, wearing after wearing after wearing. I have Chanel trim on this garment, and I've got a really cute top, but I want to show you how to do something really fun. You want to take a yardstick and you want to take a marker and draw on your pattern a 10-inch line. Now this is like halfway in between on your front piece. Draw a horizontal line that is 10 inches. And then what you're going to do is you're going to draw a diagonal line. And I'm going to do this diagonal line in silver. I like silver so that you all can see it just a little bit more. And there's that diagonal line. Now, if you take a striped piece of fabric, and I'm just going to use this as my fabric, and I lay that diagonal line on that fabric, I instantly have a bias. Everything is chevroned, and that's exactly what Barbara has on. She has on a chevron top. Now, the easiest way to get that chevron to stay in place is to actually glue that seam allowance together with that glue stick, and then none of the chevron will move. So thank you, Barbara, you look gorgeous. So that's a really simple way to get a different look to this same pattern, and all it requires is for you to draw a diagonal line. Now, one of the other things that and you can see the chevron on the pattern, one of the other things I'm going to suggest that you do, and I don't want you to laugh at me when I do this, but it's the truth. This product I told you the pattern is fabulous. So what I'd like to suggest you do is after you make your pattern and you're happy with it, stand in front of a mirror with this on the top of you and draw exactly where your bust points are. That way, if you use any kind of fabric that has a design or you want to put any kind of seam into it, you want to make sure that these are in a nice place. I made a garment one time that had circles on them. And I made the garment, wasn't paying any attention. I put the garment on. There was one circle, but the bad part was there was a second circle. And then there was nothing. So it really was not attractive. So from then on, I tell people, draw that on your pattern. No issue whatsoever. I want to show you another shirt that Barbara has on. This looks so cute on her. Isn't this cute? So what I did was I literally chevroned the fabric, laid the fabric down, and then laid the pattern over top of what I had already chevroned. So you really chevron the fabric before you cut out your pattern. And you get a really cute look like that. That looks cute.
Thanks.
This product is called Frenchfuse, and I point this product out because it literally will change your life of sewing. It'll really change the way you look at fabric. You can take a very soft fabric and turn it into a very tailored garment. Now, I changed jackets, you probably noticed, and one of the reasons I did was to tell you that this fabric is a really soft knit. I put Frenchfuse on the whole inside of this jacket. I now even have welt pockets in this jacket. I have a zipper, a very heavy zipper, and I have a collar on it. Now this jacket, the directions for this jacket is on variations 4, but I want to point out the Frenchfuse that's in there that changed the hand of the fabric. My husband and I both love to watch Project Runway, but we both like to watch the beginning and the end. And he was sitting there watching the end with me one night, and the lady came out and she modeled, and she turned around, and as she walked back to the back room, you could see that her zipper was all buckled. We call that a bacon zipper because that's exactly what it looks like. And he said, without batting an eyelash, oh, if she'd have had Frenchfuse in that fabric, she wouldn't have had that zipper do that. So even he knows that. So anytime you put a zipper in anywhere, whether it's the front of a jacket, if it's a side zipper, even a fly front zipper, if you'll simply put Frenchfuse where that zipper is going to be inserted, you will never have it pull or buckle again. When you're going to do a garment and you want it to look tailored, like what I have on, use Frenchfuse. Frenchfuse is a tricot interfacing, comes in 3 different colors, 60 inches wide, and I sell it on my website. I do want to tell you that this product does not need to be pre-shrunk, so don't worry about doing anything like that. You're going to iron it to the wrong side of your fabric. There is a video on the website that shows you exactly how to iron it on. You're going to love it, and again, it totally changes the hand. This is your master top pattern, and you made it out of a knit fabric. and you've got your pattern, it fits, you're great, you're happy, you're thrilled. So now we're going to take this pattern that you made for knit fabric, and now we're going to use it with woven fabric. The difference being woven is not going to stretch, so there's a few things that we need to do differently. I'm going to suggest that you make a new pattern and mark it woven. So the next time you pick it up, you know the difference between the knit and the woven. On the variations, on each one of the variations, it will tell you step by step on how much you need to add according to the garment that you're making. You can have just a nice lightweight summer jacket out of a cotton fabric. All you need to do is take a scrap of your pattern ease and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the front and the back on both sides. Then whatever you add to the seam allowance of the garment, you need to make sure that you add that same amount to both sides of the sleeve, because remember that sleeve has to fit into that armhole. You can scotch tape that in place and you will have a woven pattern. You can go all the way up to a coat. You can make a winter coat off of this same knit top pattern. You would add an inch seam allowance. Now when you do this, keep in mind, if you add a 1/2 inch, you're adding 2 whole inches to your garment. If you're making a coat, you're going to be adding 4 whole inches. This is the FitNice system. The FitNice system includes that master top pattern that you've been working on today, a master pants pattern, and believe me, it fits just as well as that master top. The master pants pattern comes with a DVD, walks you through it again, and a big master pattern. You also get one of each one of these variations. There are 5 variations in this packet. As I told you before, over 100 garments. There are 2 other DVDs. One shows you tricks, and those tricks are some of the tricks that we talked about. How to use Frenchfuse. Frenchfuse is a wonderful product that will change the hand of your fabric. Love Frenchfuse. I sell it in 3 different colors. And you'll also learn all about the glues. There's more glues I use than just the glue sticks, so you'll learn about the glues. The other one is on fitting. It'll just give you some hints on any fitting issues that you might have. These are DVDs. And the last thing that comes in the system is how to take your pants pattern, your basic pants pattern, and turn it into jeans. There's nothing more miserable than a pair of jeans that aren't comfortable. So this shows you how to do that, how to make comfortable jeans. The entire system that consists of all 10 of these items is $195. If you buy it as a system as opposed to buying it piece by piece by piece, you save about $70, which is quite a savings. If you're interested in the system, go to www.fitnicesystem.com and you can purchase it there. Thank you.